Hi, I'm Carla J Easton. I'm here with Tamara Schlesinger, aka MALKA, to interview her for Into Creative.
Now it's time to breathe. Believe, believe, believe. Now it's time to breathe. Believe, believe, believe.
The first time I became aware of you and saw you perform was way back in 2018, I think. You'd maybe just moved back to Glasgow, and I was at a So Far Sounds. And it was like January 2018, and some of my friends were playing at it, and it was the first time I saw you, and you had like this amazing headdress on and like sparkles and stuff, and I was like, wow, this is like David Bowie for the DIY scene in Glasgow. Why have I not seen or heard of you before? And the percussive rhythms you used and the pop melodies, I was just like total blown away. So that was like my first introduction to MALKA, and I was like, wow, we need to get this record and stuff. So for anyone that doesn't know you, do you want to just explain MALKA?
Yeah, so MALKA is, well, I don't know, this new album, I don't know what it's going to be, but it's quite heavy on percussion, and it's weird because I used to be in a band called 6 Day Riot, and that was also quite rhythm heavy. But after I had my child, I decided to go solo, and I started MALKA, and I started playing about with loops and beats and top lining melodies on top of beats, which I'd never done before. I always picked up a ukulele and sung a folk song. And so it kind of grew from there. It's just, I love pop. We were just talking about tune yards. I love tune yards. I love rhythm. I love just hooks. And so it was just kind of me just expressing myself in music. And then 3 albums in, still going. But yeah, that's MALKA really. And now I've just started a new album, which is probably much more electronic, and I'm really into my synths. I'm into analog synths now and kind of weird noises. So possibly influenced by Licky Lee and like like Glass Animals and things like that.
Yeah, cool. And because you started out in a band, sort of like more in the, I guess you would call it the indie scene. So how does it feel like kind of going from that into this kind of like alt pop kind of sphere?
I think with 6 Day Riot, we always had really hooky melodies. Melody was always important to me, but we were really welcomed into the folk scene. And it was double bass, accordions, violins, loved bands like the Decemberists, Devochka, people like that. And I think just, it's really hard to get a band together to rehearse. And we'd done 3 albums, and it was all on my own label. I've always run my own label, and it was really successful, but I think I just got tired of trying to get everyone in a room, everyone to agree, and the drummer wanted more drums, the violinist wanted more violin, and I just thought, I think after having my daughter, a really good way to spend my one day, I had 1 day a week that I could, because I had her at home a few days, I lecture in music business, and I had 1 day a week to make music, and I thought, rather than pulling an entire band together, how's about I just, do this myself? And it was a really conscious decision not to pick up any acoustic instruments and to sound different, because I didn't want people thinking, why has she left the band to sound like the band? So that's why I went electro, really. And then I just felt quite comfortable in that realm, just kind of felt natural to me.
It's quite interesting when you go from band to solo artist, because I've done that as well, and there's a certain element of creative freedom that I enjoy with it, because you're not having to sort of be democratic, right? Okay, we've got a drummer, so they need to be on every track, or a bassist or whatever, but also like you're saying, like the time you have and time limitations. So maybe if you've got 1 day a week, that's your day a week, and it doesn't match up with anyone else. And we've spoken about, the various things you do in your career and how we term that like a portfolio career. So that could be songwriting or lecturing or session for someone, and obviously like then parenting as well. Do you want to talk a bit more about this idea of like the portfolio career?
Yeah, I think for a long time that's what I have had. I think a lot of people often think that musicians just do music, and there's not many of us that can just do music. So I was really lucky. I'd had my daughter, I was on mat leave, and one of my old managers had moved into lecturing, and he asked me if I would apply for this job. And I was like, really? I don't know if I can lecture properly. And I went in, and I didn't realise that I was having I don't know what I thought I was doing. Probably I was a bit sleep deprived, but I don't think I realised I was having an interview. So I kind of went in like, so, like, so we're doing this module on branding and marketing. What would you do? And I was lucky because my degree was in fashion and marketing, so I actually had and I've always done my visuals, I've always done my artwork, so I had quite strong ideas. So I pulled together this module idea, and they hired me. So I did 2 days a week with that. I've always session sung on adverts. I remember singing like an Andrex advert and not telling everyone, and then friends all going, "Tamara, is that you?" on that advert. So I've session sung, I've written for TV and ads. I have done, I've mentored people, but also kind of worked almost consulting, I suppose, and done campaigns, PR campaign or concepts for people. And I'm a mum, I suppose that's also a job. And so I think it's all these different things. That's what makes me me. And it's kind of essential. I just couldn't do it. So I think it's really important to always think about what you're good at and what your strengths are, and find work within that role as well, because I think it's really hard just to make a living. I mean, some people do make just a living from music, but even just from music, what is that? Is that just live, or is it writing other stuff, or is it, session playing in other bands? I think it's not often that someone will just do one band and kind of live off just that, really. So
Yeah, and I think you have to do everything to an extent, especially if you're in this sort of DIY realm where it is you are your own label, you are your own PR, you are your own creative director, as well as like writing the songs and booking the tours and booking the recording schedule and stuff like that. But I also think it's really interesting the way that we've moved into this sort of social media world where it's very image influenced, like coming from an arts background and stuff, that's ended up being something to your advantage. And I just wondered if you had any sort of advice out there about curating. It's, for me, I always think it's not so much just band now, it's like brand and band and building them together. Yeah,
I think for me, like you talked about my headpieces, that's my thing. I always, even with Six to Riot, I didn't want to go on stage as me. I liked to be something a bit different. And especially when I had kids, I didn't want to be a mum on stage. I wanted to feel like a different person on stage. So for me, that was taking on this kind of identity and pushing it further, but then pushing it into my art and the visuals. And I've mostly, sometimes other people do some of the art, but I mostly do all the art because I love painting and I love art in general. And I think I don't need to pay someone. It's one of those, I don't need to pay someone to do it because I can do Photoshop and I can create that myself. But the brand is so important and it's so boring. And if you think about it though, we're living in social media world, we're scrolling, and what's going to grab our attention first is a visual, probably, before we even hear this music. So if you want to grab that attention, you need a strong visual, but it also has to identify your sound, because there's no point in just having like, I don't know, some goth image and having like folk music, which is probably what we do with Six to Riot, and having a stupid name like Six to Riot when you're a folk pop band, but worked to our advantage. But I think it's become more and more important to kind of project that style through your visuals, but also not to just copy someone else that's out there, to find your own visuals and styles. And if you're not good at it, work with someone that understands you and your music, and collaborate. And I think collaborating with other people, so you can, even if you have no budget, maybe they'll do that free if you'll do something else for them, like barter, old school things like that. So it is important. It's really important, and it's probably frustrating for people that it's important, I think, if you don't have a knowledge of it or don't know where to start. But I think there's always somewhere to start or someone that can help you with it.
Yeah, I think collaboration's really key there, isn't it? Because I've done that before. You work with a filmmaker and maybe give them complete creative control of the thing, or they give you the material to edit yourself, and then you make a soundtrack for one of their films later, or stuff like that. It's really key. But I think as well, what I'm interested in is just when you combine, like, when you think about artwork on like an LP or a CD or a cassette or posters or t-shirts and stuff, and just that journey and narrative and how that links into the music and stuff. And we were talking about albums earlier, and this idea of a body of work and how to really combine all that, so it's this visual thing as well as a sonic thing. And you kind of wonder, is it getting lost a bit these days? Is it still, are we still working in that way, or is it more singles or EPs? And yeah, I guess it's interesting. I think we probably both started at the same time, maybe kind of around the MySpace days.
Oh,
and
God.
so, you know,
Adds friends, you know.
yeah, your top 8 contacts kind of thing, to then go into this like Spotify age and stuff. And do you want to talk a bit about adapting to
I think
it?
that's quite interesting. I think I remember, you know, even just with MySpace, how many friends you had. Yeah, and I remember actually this record producer, guy, Massey, who produced our second album, coming to us through MySpace saying, I love your music, can I do your album for you? And he's just incredible. He did the remaster of the Beatles Abbey Road records. I mean, so he's amazing. But I think MySpace was, well, there were less people. For a start, there were less artists. There were less people doing DIY. When I first did my album, it was like 2004, my first solo album. There was barely anyone self-releasing, and there was hardly any women self-releasing. I think there was like one woman in Canada and me that was like visible, you know. Everyone was on a label. So the whole landscape has shifted, and it is about adapting. And for me, I don't get a lot of Spotify plays. I don't pay for playlists. I don't really care, because that isn't how I make a living. And it's not, you know, I don't want to be cool and young and doing loads of, you know, showing that I've got 1 million plays. It doesn't mean that much to me, but what other things mean a lot to me. And I was really lucky with 6 Day Riot. We got this sync on Scream 4 and Skins quite early in our career, in my career. And that has been my trajectory to making a living. And I'm lucky that I have that, which is your music on TV and film. I think it's really hard to go from touring and selling 3,000 records of your album on your own label to struggling, say, with Equalizer to shift the copies, and knowing where the money is and what you're going to sell now. It's just a completely different situation, I think. It really is.
I think as well, so I mean, that's a good segue into over the last sort of two and a half years. You've started this new initiative, collective, publishing, whatever you want to label it, all of those, called Hen Hoose, which is, you know, to get writers together to write for sync. So I guess it'd be quite good to just sort of talk about, like, what is a sync? Why is that important?
Yeah.
How do writers earn money from that sync?
So sync is when your music's used on TV or film, so synchronized music with visuals, I suppose. How do you get them? It can be hard, usually through a publisher, but not always. Sometimes you could work with an ad agency or someone, you know, an editor often puts a lot of music into a film. So if they really know the music scene, they might put the music in, and then the producer of the show would have to then get clearance. So they need your permission to use the music. And because they need your permission, they have to pay you to use it. And that varies from barely anything to really big money on big adverts, for example. And you have the writing side as a writer, and you have the mechanicals or the master side as the record label. So if you're signed to a label, they usually own the masters. If you are the writer and you're not signed to a publisher, you'll own the publishing. So together it's 100%, and I've always owned 100% myself. But sometimes you have someone working on your behalf. So I work with lots of agents non-exclusively, so they pitch stuff. But with Hen Hoose, we've also worked with ad agencies directly. So it's kind of different ways of working. And if there's more than one writer, you have to split your cuts and you have to agree your cuts. And if you're signed to a publishing deal, they need to give permission for usage of the track as well. So it can get really complicated if you're, say, I don't know, U2, that's a terrible example, but I can't imagine it's that easy to get clearance on, say, U2, because there's probably loads of writers. You know, depending what it's used for, people may politically disagree with the usage, things like that. So, and I think a lot of people find it quite hard to navigate the world, and I don't really know what is sync friendly. I feel kind of lucky somehow. I do stuff that's sync friendly, but I can't really define what that is. But there is something that is a sync friendly thing, and that seems to do well. That's right, you're really useless. And it's not always that it's hooky. It can be just a bit weird or a bit different, or it has to fit, you know, like just say you've written this song. A friend was playing me a song last night. It was about the devil, and there was a documentary about this horrific doctor, and that was used in that scene, and that totally makes sense, right? Because it somehow that song was there and it fitted that scene right there and right then. That's kind of luck, and the person has to find your music. And how do they find your music? You know, so publishers are useful for that, or sync agents for that. Yeah.
And it's also just really great because I guess when we're talking about, you know, a lot of artists do write their own music, especially on that sort of independent DIY scene. You maybe don't have a team where you've got a manager that can go, right, we're going to pair you with these 3 writers in LA and write a hit. Or, you know, I think it was speaking about Lewis Capaldi's album. Before that album was released, I think there was 180 songs kind of written for it by teams all over the world. And a lot of us are not in that position. So to be able to work with other people who are also writing their own material, collaborate, you learn a lot from each other, but it's the income as a writer, because, you know, when we're in a pandemic and tours are off, and you're not often making money from the tours anyway, a lot of the time you're lucky if you break even. So to get these writing commissions and royalties coming through are great, especially in a digital age. I mean,
Yeah.
we've spoken about Spotify streams. Does that translate to income coming in for an artist or a writer these days?
For me, I feel like because I own 100%, and like I said, I don't get masses of streams. I kind of do, you know, I don't make, I mean, I certainly am not retiring on my Spotify income. I'd probably buy a bottle of milk or a carton of milk or something, but I get some money, and I do, from Spotify. But no, I mean, no, it's awful. It's like 0.001 pence a stream. I don't even know what the number is. It's just awful. And, you know, and if you're signed to a label, they get a cut of that. If you're signed to a manager, they get a cut of that. I mean, even with 1 million plays, people aren't, and then it's 4 in a band, you know, no one's living off that money. It's not viable for a living. So it's not ideal. And I think you're right, that way of collaborating or writing music together, a lot of people don't realize how much you can get from writing together and gaining more experience of working with someone in a different genre or something like that. And so working to brief, it makes you write a bit differently from how you've written before, makes you think differently, and then it probably makes you do different with your own music. Like I was saying, this new album I'm working on, I'd say the reason I've changed style so dramatically is probably from doing the Hen Hoose album and just trying new things, and you know, being in lockdown and not being in a normal studio and being in a home studio and just plugging things in and, you know, going digital, if you like. So yeah, I think it's a unusual landscape we're in. I think people are trying to make a difference, trying to get more revenue from streaming. While the majors are in control of that, I think we're going to struggle. So things like Bandcamp, places like that, are good for kind of getting direct money to the artist, you know, but things need to change quite a lot, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're talking about, like, you know, what a sync is, these writing opportunities, and falling under the umbrella of Hen Hoose. But one of the key factors of Hen Hoose is it's women and non-binary writers.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about the decision behind that and why that's relevant?
Yeah,
today?
I think we all know the stats for festival lineups. I mean, you know, you see the posters on social media doing the rounds, remove all the men and you're left with 2 women on this poster. So that was one thing I think I was consistently getting frustrated and posting on social media. And I saw the stats from PRS, 17% of writers registered to PRS, which is the Performing Rights Society, the Collections Royalties Agency, are women. MPG, the Music Producers Guild, 2% are registered as producers. And I thought, oh, this is just really awful. But there's only so much you can shout about this. And I was thinking about it. There's quite a few initiatives, but it's not just about having initiatives and about us shouting about it and creating visibility. How do we make change? And it's not the gatekeepers that are making change. They're not doing anything. So we need to try and do it. So that was kind of the idea of Hen Hoose, was to try and show the talent of women in the industry, but also to give a platform to these women and to try and get revenue stream for them as well, non-binary artists. There's a long way to go. You know, it's just embarrassing, in fact. And signed, I think it's like 25% of artists signed to major labels are women. So that also gives this idea of competition as well, because there aren't enough festival slots then for every female artist. There aren't enough record deals. There aren't enough publishing deals. So we shouldn't have that sense of competition, but inevitably there will be, because you're all fighting for one spot that doesn't really exist, you know?
So I don't know you know them, 'cause baby I'm all on. No, I don't need that something. I know that them.
And Hen Hoose is, I mean, I was one of the writers that was part of it, so the way it worked, obviously, was during the pandemic, so none of us were in a room together writing, which actually ended up being one of the successful part, or what made it so successful, because, you know, we had people who were maybe having to be in another country because of family or whatever could take part. If anyone else had sort of childcare or work, they could drop in and do their writing and send it on to someone else and collaborate that way. So do you want to talk about that? Because I feel like that's a really important way that's facilitating more people to be
I think it's
creative.
really great, actually, remote work. I think a lot of people have gone back to stopping remote work, or kind of, like I was, when they were doing, like, I don't know, big conferences, and they would always stream it in, and now you're more likely to go in person, and the networking is in person. That was actually something with lockdown that was the one positive I felt as a mother. Like, I mean, the house was chaos when I was up writing the music, but I could write the music. I didn't have to get someone to look after my kids. And you're right, there were other people doing jobs, and you can fit around, and it can be quite hard when you go in the studio. It's like you probably book a couple of days at least to do a writing session. You didn't have to, you could fit it around your time. And I think that was really brilliant. And this time we're going to have writers that are not based in Scotland as well, which means we'll be able to remote write with someone in London or Belfast while they've been in Scotland. It's kind of opened up this world that, in fact, I've almost forgotten how to write with someone in person. In fact, Suze lives around the corner, and we were pitching for an advert, and we were still doing it remote. And she's like, why have we not sat in a room? So I've totally forgotten how to do that. So, obviously that's not ideal, but I think it's opened things up. And we're talking a bit about, the age discrimination in the music industry. There's artists that maybe wouldn't have been able to dedicate the time. Maybe you'd have been on tour anyway, who knows what we might have been doing. But, I think it's just been accessible. It gives accessibility to everyone by doing it in this way. You don't have to travel from Edinburgh to Glasgow. You don't have to come from the Highlands. It just kind of means everyone that can be involved gets to be involved without any issues.
Yeah, and I think accessibility is one of the key factors in it. And, some people might be like, but what if you don't have a microphone, or you have this stuff you need to, record your idea? But that's why it's so great that it's not just songwriters, there are producers, because, someone could send a voice note of a lyric and a melody, but that's fine because the producer can make that into a track, and then someone else could be brought in who could record the vocal.
And you can sing, you can write the lyric, you can sing a melody line, you don't have to sing on it. And I mean, I think even there was at one point I kind of got someone, because you were allowed to go into a studio at one point, I think, and I got someone into another studio to use a mic. But you're right, the roles are such that you didn't need to have all the equipment. It's great if you did, because you can come up with a melody line. I mean, most of mine are walking down the street singing into my phone. Do you know what I mean? So it wasn't like you had to sit there, record it beautifully, and send it back. And a lot of people, a lot of people did have the gear, but equally others didn't, and we made it work. We made it work even on awful mics. Suze was, a master at kind of I don't know what she did, but she got it all sounding great, amazing, yeah.
So you mentioned Suze Bear, and who's brilliant, and their album's coming out this year, and it's really exciting as well. But do you want to talk about who else was involved?
Yeah, so there's Emma Pollock, so Karine Polwart, Inga Thompson, Pippa Murphy. I'm going to reel them off and probably forget someone. Yourself, obviously, Amanda Wilkinson, Rachel from Cloth Band, Elizabeth Electra. I was involved. I know I've missed people, but and more. Jada, brand new rapper, who's really great as well. And I think that was quite exciting, was finding new up and coming people as well as part of the project. And we're doing the next round, we are bringing some other people. This was quite established writers, really, wasn't it? So I want to play about with bringing less established writers up and coming with the established writers to kind of, benefit from that experience, that knowledge. And I think you also benefit from someone that's fresh in the scene and really excited, because we were all like, I've had enough. Yeah, miserable. So it's like nice to have someone that's really like excited to be a part of it. So, but that way of collaborating, because we'd have, you know, I worked with Corinne, who's obviously folk, and had this kind of, I don't know what this electronic dancey thing was, and collaborating across genres was really interesting as well. I particularly like playing with putting people that you wouldn't expect to come together, because that was quite a nice way of just bringing something different. And I think all of us, I mean, say Amanda, she'd never produced anything before. But
And it sounds like she's an amazing producer.
Unbelievable.
I know.
You know, honestly unbelievable. And you were thinking, how did you... And a lot of us somehow sat in this production role and never took the credit as being producers, when actually probably a lot of us were doing loads at home, produced and self-producing. And because then I would self-produce a lot at home, but then I'd go in the studio, right, and finish in the studio. So I never counted myself as a producer. All of a sudden, this entire album I'm working on, I'm producing myself. I wouldn't have done that if I hadn't done it. I really wouldn't. I wouldn't have had the confidence. I don't know if it was that... Well, it was partly that lockdown, because we couldn't get in a studio, so we had to do it all at home. So the project had to work with us all, you know, in the box, if you like. So, and it did work.
And it's great because this project sort of grew arm and legs. So it was like, right, we'll get writers together, establish a publishing house, like get all this stuff, pitch for syncing stuff. And then it's resulted in a beautiful album that decided to release on vinyl as well. And it's just so great when you listen back to it, because it's not one genre of music. There's kind of something for everyone. And I think, you know, it also proves that the songs stand up on their own as a body of work as well, if we go back to that idea, body of work in an album. So it's really exciting that that's sort of like a blueprint for what's next. And so we need to mention being successful in funding from Creative Scotland for the next round of Hen Hoose. So what is the plans for round two?
So round two, as I said already, it was amazing during Christmas. We got this surprise delivery from the John Lennon Foundation of this vinyl of Happy Christmas Was Over, to auction off to raise funds for Hen Hoose. So the funds from that are going to bring in non-Scottish writers and producers, because the Creative Scotland money is for the Scottish writers and producers. So we've got writers such as Anchoress, Bessie Turner, Bishy coming in on that side. And then we're broadening, we're bringing in new writers and keeping some of our other writers. Writing to brief again, and we're doing a short course in production and mixing at Chem 19, bringing in some music industry work experience. So we're kind of trying to, I think it's like the infrastructure in Scotland, it needs to grow, and the fact that we could offer some work experience to people that want to go in the business side as well and be a part of the project meant that they could have something on their CVs as well. So that's where we're going. Like you said, it was never meant to be an album. It was always like, it could be an album if we love it, but it was so good. And I was like, we can't just pop this out for sync. We need people to hear how like amazingly talented all these people are. Maybe we'll do the same again. Hopefully it'll be amazing and we'll want to do it again. And we're literally getting started. So Ellie, who worked on the last project with me, assisting me, is back involved as well. And we're doing, it's kind of nerve-wracking and fun, where you start putting people together and you're like, oh, is that the right decision? And we're just at that point now where we're kind of about to see who's going to work together on the next round. So.
If I'm just your average music fan, why is what everything Hen Hoose is doing important to me? Why should I care about it?
Well, I think it's amazing. But no, I think in terms of the music, I think it's important to you because I think you need to see what there is out there, what there is on your doorstep, how talented these people are. I think it's important because change has to happen from everyone. So you need to know that we need to create change, and that has to come from you too. And I think that it's just, we need to understand, you know, if you're a fan of an industry, you need to understand how it works. Well, really, most of the artists aren't making a lot of money. Most of the artists need other revenue sources and streams. And we just kind of need to have an awareness within every industry of how it works and what we can do to help facilitate change. So Hen Hoose is, you know, it is about shining a light on women and non-binary writers. That's the first and foremost, is about gender equality in the music industry. And there's so much work to do. But as an outsider, hopefully you're looking in and you're seeing, well, actually, all these songs are amazing. So why aren't they all getting booked for festivals? Why aren't they all getting syncs everywhere? Why aren't they signed to labels? So that's the hope, is that people start seeing that, you know, change needs to happen.
The best thing to mention is how can we support Hen Hoose?
Yes, you can buy the vinyl.
And where do you buy the
You
vinyl?
can get it from the Hen Hoose website and from Last Night from Glasgow. And in fact, I think it's in stores now. Wherever you like, yeah.
And it's a really, really great
Do
album.
you know, it's absolutely brilliant. It's pressed on Eco Mix vinyl as well, so everyone is different, individual. But I was like a proud mother when I listened back to the record. I just was amazed. I mean, I knew everyone was talented anyway, but it's kind of, it flows, it feels like it's a body of work, yet it's also different. It's just, I'm incredibly proud of it, and everyone involved in it, and more people should listen to it.
And also, if anyone was wanting to commission you for work, they can contact Hen Hoose.
Contact Hen Hoose. We've been doing quite a lot. We write to brief, so if you send a brief to us, we can write to it. And we've been doing, it's been great. We're doing really well with that. And we're kind of working with a couple of agencies also in London as well now, so we're kind of just broadening. But yeah, the exciting thing with Hen Hoose is whatever the brief, we can write to it, because we have writers across multiple genres in the collective. So, you know, you can just say we want this, and we're like, we have just the person for it, and send someone else in to do it, which is great.
Cool. And yeah, so next step is round 2, but also simultaneously next MALKA album.
That's true, and I have to find a new headpiece for that one. More sparkles.
Cool. Is there anything else you want to talk about or mention, or you quite happy?
Yeah.
Cool.